our relatives lived in the city and in Buffalo. And so my aunts were older and his father was older. So we spent a lot of time traveling back and forth from Niagara Falls to Buffalo to check on them. And then church was in Buffalo and friends, and although we had friends in Niagara Falls, we finally settled in Buffalo. But before that time, this was, let's see, we were married in 64. So this must have been around 66. And then, because our first child was born in 67.
Okay.
So anyhow, we had applied for apartments and flats and so forth. And before, when we would call on the phone, people would say, "Oh, please come, come, come." And so we would go to see the apartment, and all of a sudden it was rented. And it's really interesting to see now that area is, completely with diversity and everything. At that time it didn't. And so we applied for an apartment at 144 East Delavan, and that was in Hamlin Park. But we didn't know it was in Hamlin Park, we just applied for it. And so it was an African-American family, and they adopted us and we adopted them, and they were babysitters and all of that, once we started having children. So, but at that particular time, we were so busy with raising children and finishing school. My husband was in school as an undergraduate at UB, and then working. And I was doing some work part-time with mom and, those kinds of things. So when we recognized that we were in Hamlin Park, we started attending meetings and things of that sort. And we used to meet at the building on Humboldt and Ferry, that school, old school there. And so then we graduated from there to the Lutheran home here. And so my sons, when they were older, in that period of 8 to 11 and so forth, and then even after, I would take them on Saturdays and we would give out the flyers about Hamlin Park's meetings. And but a lot of the fury and the fight had begun before my husband and I were fully acclimated into Hamlin Park, when they were doing the overlay with the transportation and fighting that. And that was a big battle, because they had promised the community that it would be cut and cover, and then they tried to renege on that and make everything above ground. And so they fought, and that's how we have the stations at the various places. And it was very interesting how it was discovered. Some of Mrs. Strasner and Mr. Perkins, who are now deceased, they had gone over to the Science Museum, and they had seen this graphic map of plans for the future, and it included Mrs. Strasner's house. And so that was really a bombshell. So she told everybody in the community, and people came together, and they fought it, and they won. And so that was one of the times that I really saw really politics in action, and how a group of small people would be able to change minds because they made it very visible. And the other was before we moved into Buffalo, that's when they had put in the 190, and they took away that mall. It was a beautiful mall. I didn't have the privilege of being a part of that, you know, in terms of walking, but I saw pictures and I talked to others like Mrs. Strasner and Mr. Perkins, and they talked about how beautiful it was. And if you go to look at pictures from the Olmsted Conservancy, they have pictures where that was, you know, like a flow from Delaware Park and from the Delaware Park where the Hoyt Lake is in that area, that flowed all the way over to the Science Museum. And people would have picnics out and you know, and the children played in that area. So that's where Restore comes in, to see if that could be something that would be a legacy for young people and children in the area to explore and have that experience of the mall again. And I don't think that I will see it in my lifetime, but hopefully others will see the benefit of that, because it adds that kind of vibrancy to a community, and it also helps with framing things, that kids see the symbiotic relationship between nature and, you know, and people. And research shows that in urban areas where they have that kind of an arrangement with the parks and the recreation, that health factors are better for people, and also it's a safe haven for children and they feel that safeness. So I'm hoping that that will come. One of the other things that we experienced, though, was the onslaught of flight from the city, and then we had flight from Hamlin Park, where it was the homes were sold to African American families, and many of the homes were not in code, meaning they weren't up to par. And so that's when they put in the overlay from the Common Council, and that was something for the city, that houses could not be sold unless they were in proper code and inspection. And you would see a little blue shield on a house that said it was in compliance. And that kind of went by the way of politicians and so forth. And so that was lifted, which was sad, because it ensured that if you went to buy a house, you were assured that the electric, you know, the wiring was in code, the plumbing was in code, and those kinds of things. So with that being enforced, then I could sell you a house, and once you were in it and so forth, you would see, oh, I have all this work to do, I have all of this, and you hadn't included that in your plan, you know, of finance. So that was something. So we were told that going the route of preservation would help us. And so that's how we got into, with so many houses in Hamlin Park would be included in preservation. And that would stop some of the entrepreneurs coming in and buying the houses and so forth. And that was when we had the battles with Canisius and the Unsoin colleges, because people the students would graduate from Canisius, or if they came in as freshmen, parents or relatives would buy property. Yeah. And then they would subdivide the inside of the house. And there might be, in a house that only had 3 bedrooms, there would become 6. and people were charging students inordinate amounts of money, for rent. And I would always say, why in the world won't they stay in the dorms? It's safer, because if you don't have the guarantee that the house is in code, it's really putting the student at jeopardy, because you don't know if a fire or any of that could happen in a house, or the plumbing, or uh, uh, with the carbon monoxide, any of those things could happen.
What year is it that you're speaking of right now that this really began to come to your attention?
Okay, we started with that in the 80s, and then we went into the 90s. It was always something that was going on, and with outside people, they could live in the suburbs, they could even live in another state and buy a property, and they saw Kenesha students as revenue generating for them.
Absolutely.
And they did that, and it wasn't just there were students that from UB, some from Buff State, that the entrepreneurs, they saw the housing stock as also cheaper than in other neighborhoods. And so we are still fighting some of that battle today. We're still fighting some of that battle. And what's happening, the properties on the west side have been priced out of renters there, and especially people who are struggling. So then we're getting in Hamlin Park more of those people, and I don't say it in a derogatory way, we're getting more of that population because of that. And so a person might buy a house in Hamlin Park for maybe $100,000, $130,000, but they recoup that in no time, and you divide it into 6 bedrooms. You know what I mean? And so that has been an ongoing problem since I've lived in Hamlin Park. And the next, though, with the preservation, young families coming in that wanted to make exterior changes. You could not do exterior changes to your home, and that began once we had the preservation, and I think that was about in the early 90s, because I remember Sue McCartney was one of the lead people who helped Hamlin Park get that designation. And so what it said also, that you could not use materials on the exterior of your house that were not approved by the Preservation Board. So that made improvements more expensive. And if you had, for example, a slate roof, you could not change that roofing without going before the Preservation Board. And if you had windows that were leaded or of that character of the house, you could not change that. And most times when you went to the Preservation Board, that was the case. They would not change it for you. Because I know my neighbor and who in the house next door at 44, and I were going to use the same contractor when we're going to change our roofing. And they told us what color we could have. And it was how many layers that you had underneath, so you had to get that out and so forth. And they approved your roofing. And so some people saw it as a curse, and others saw it as a benefit, for preserving the neighborhood. Father Cook was very extending to the community in Hamlin Park. and I just absolutely loved him. He would come to meetings, he would send deans to meetings. Um, he set up the McGowan scholarship there, and students who met the entrance criteria for Canisius were given, priority for applying. And so they also opened up Canisius for study times, and their athletic program was placed in School 74 and School 17. And that was the outreach that Father Cook extended. And I even remember that my sons used to use the library, so they had library privileges for coming in and that. And we would have holiday programs and events there. And over the years, I had done something with scholarship earlier on, and we did fundraising, and the fundraising went toward establishing the scholarship program that we would give to students who were going to college. And Canisius did outreach with us in terms of, I did and had a committee, and we did a fashion show. And we started off having it at the auditorium at Deaconess Hospital. So you know how long ago that was. Deaconess has been gone. And that was like in the late 80s that we used to do fashion shows there. And we used the students in the community, because Hamlin Park goes up to Utica in that area, so we did. And so we had the fashion shows and utilized the students or the young people from the community. And that gave us monies for those things and other activities. Then we moved, Father Cook permitted us to use the Palisano room, where the cafeteria, and that was a real nice place for a fashion show, because they would put the runway, in the center and the tables on the outside. It was really, really nice. And so we would have that there. Then we had, what else did we used to do holiday events like Christmas and caroling and everything. So when all of the tension and so forth was going on between the college and the community, he came in and he did different things. And so that helped us a great deal. And I had a lot of respect for him.
Now, was Father Cook affiliated with the community or Canisius?
He was the president at that time.
Oh.
Yeah, he was the president.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Yes, and he would have the deans come to, the meetings and things like that.
That's amazing.
And he was able to quell a lot of the tension, because young people in your age group, they did not like, some of the Canisius students were very aggressive, and some of the older people in my category were upset because they didn't have respect for the community. And I remember going to some of the meetings and saying to the students, if I were to come to your neighborhood, would you appreciate the behavior that you're demonstrating, in your community, if I were to do that? And so some were understanding, and others, it's my time away from home and it's my money I'm spending and whatever, and so forth. So we had a number of marches and crusades and letter writing and all of that to kind of quell that. And we even had where some of the students on Loring were rolling beer kegs down. They don't have beer kegs anymore. Down the streets, and with megaphones, yelling obscenities. You know, that was a really intense time. And so,
That's
uh,
incredible.
yeah, Father Cook, yeah, was very instrumental in helping to do that. And then we started going to some of the receptions for parents and freshmen, and just telling them about some of the values of the community, what we expected, and and to carry forth with that, we really wanted students to invest, like you're doing, in the community. What, after you leave and you graduate, and you've lived in a community that's struggling to be vibrant, and you have all socioeconomic classes living in that community,
Absolutely.
what can you contribute that's lasting, that you feel proud of, that you left behind? And so you know, as I said, with the tutoring groups that they started to have, and I think it's going to be revived again, and just studies. For example, there used to be an athletic program that had some academics in it as well, that ran all summer at Canisius. And it was written on the demographics, the grant was written on the demographics of the community. And so that went on for several years. And I got busy, and my sons were busy in other things, so I really didn't keep track as to whether it was functioning or not. And then I looked around one day, and it was gone, and I saw a facsimile of a program, but it was only geared for those who were able to pay, and it was athletic geared. It was not with academics and all of that type thing. So I don't know, to tell you the truth, and I haven't, health-wise, and then I was caretaker for my husband, I really haven't kept track as to how that is functioning.
Absolutely. So it seems like Canisius is kind of a large influencer in the Hamlin Park.
Oh yeah,
neighborhood.
it's, and Mr. Hurley is the first, I think, lay person
Yes.
to be president. And I think it's a learning process, and it's a pity that they didn't have him under the tutelage of Father Cook, you know, and I'm not blaming the college, I'm just saying the history and the nuances that he had established, you know, would be good to be carried on. But sometimes we who are younger want to do our own thing, so that's, so, you know, I mean, I'm not putting handcuffs on a person either. I'm just saying there is some wisdom with having someone in the background who is knowledgeable of these things, and
Absolutely.
has a heart for carrying it on. Not everybody has a heart for carrying on that. And Father Cook would walk in the community, and some mornings my husband and I would be walking, and we'd fall in step with him. You know, we'd walk over to Delaware Park and back. And so it was those kinds of things, you know.
Yeah.
But having, if you were to ask me about living in Hamlin Park for those 47 years, I have enjoyed my neighbors, and we have done outreach with, when the loudness, for example. My neighbor across the street is young, and his sister bought the house, and he's African. And so he would have the boom boxes and all the loud music. And so one day I said, well, maybe he and I can have a conversation. So I went over and I introduced myself, and I said to him, I see that you like music.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but I like music too. I said, but do you ever hear my music? He said, no. I said, well, then I shouldn't hear yours either.
Mm-hmm.
I said, let's respect each other in that way. And so we've built a relationship, and he is a fine neighbor. He has a little snowmobile, or for plowing, I don't know what you call it because I don't use it. But anyway, he takes the snow, removes the snow to the corner where the kids stand for the buses. And he goes that way down by the park where there are walkers to the school there. So as we have students who go out of Hamlin Park to all the schools, you know, because they have that open policy.
Mm-hmm.
And that really has been my journey with that, and it's amazing. We lived on Delavan,
Mm-hmm.
and then we purchased this house, and we were struggling young people, and it gave the kids freedom, and we had my father-in-law staying with us, living with us, and it was wonderful. You know, you see customs of people taking care of the old and not putting them in facilities where they really don't have the stimulation in terms of their brain and everything, and interfacing with people. And I don't have any doubt that my sons will keep me at home for as long as they can. And I have said that I want to be in my home after my husband's death a year ago, and my cancer and needing some assistance. Would I prefer downsizing? And I didn't. So I was out of the house for 7 months, and my sons, now you can do in your house, inside in the interior, whatever you want, but you have to have a permit.
Mm-hmm.
And then the construction engineer will come out and take a look at what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that is safe and structurally sound, and that. So one of the things that I have observed over the time is trying to get renters involved in the processes of Hamlin Park. Outreach with flowers, and so when I buy flowers, I get them for the house next door, and I have a little friend next door who's 5 years old. And his name is Emery, so he has, there's a family of 6, and there are 6 bedrooms there. And so and my husband purchased the house because he wanted to make sure that we had good neighbors, and he always said to me, I won't be with you all the time, so I want to make sure that you will be safe. I said, well, you don't know when God's going to call either of us, so, you know, whatever. So he did call him first, but we had the opportunity to rent and to others, but it was this family that was struggling. The husband is working a low-paying job, the wife is working a low-paying job, and these children they're trying to raise, and but they do an excellent job. And then so my husband and I and my oldest son, we've kind of reinforced what they do, and we help out, you know, whatever we can with them. Like before my last surgery, I used to take Emery to the library. He loves going to the library on the train. So we would go take the train to the library, and they have a story hour on Saturdays. And we'd go through the story hour, and then they have a Lego center. And so I introduced him to Legos, and he loves to build. And so,
Architect in the making.
yes, so we got a Lego set for him, and they were cheaper, you know, with Amazon and so forth. So we got it that way, and they had like 54 pieces for him, beginner, and then they go, you know, graduated for ages and that. So that was really, really nice. I enjoyed, and then reached out to other families, and then I have been on the housing committee with some of the seniors. We've had, at one point, we had grants that people could have, and that was up until about 95, and you know, they discontinued all of that support. So you have seniors who own homes, or if they are, you know, become disabled and go into a nursing home, and they have a family that take it over, they aren't able to do the, you know, the repairs and everything on. So we were trying to see what we could do in situations like that, and trying to block entrepreneurs going to auctions when homes are delinquent in, you know, their payment of taxes or water bill. They can take homes, you know, if your water bill is delinquent, and now they're trying with county taxes, city taxes, and user fees, you know. So those are all, if you have an exorbitant amount that you owe, they can take your home. And then they put it up for auction. Or if they get behind in their payments at the bank, their mortgage payments, the banks may do the same. So it's a push now to try to have our young people more educated about wills, and if your loved ones are elderly, how do you help, how do you prevent those kinds of things from happening.
I don't think I caught your children's names, two sons?
George and Isaac.
George and Isaac. Okay, George and Isaac.
Yeah, and Isaac is a police officer, but he graduated from college, and he went to Anianta and what's the college in Pennsylvania? I have it blocked now. In outside of
outside of Erie? Mercyhurst? Penn State?
No, this one has a prestigious name, like you're going to, I can't think of the name of it. Isn't that awful? I'm blocking. But the oldest was at Hamilton. And so Isaac tried teaching, and he was in finance, and so when finance with kids, they cut back on things, and jobs were lost, you know, and so forth and that, and so he took the exam for the police department, because this was when they had the lawsuit against the city for a lack of opportunity for minorities, and they always said they couldn't get anybody to pass the exam. So he took the exam, and, you know, of course he passed and so forth, and so he started off working in South Buffalo, and it was good for him to work in South Buffalo, because you know, the stereotypic views that people have of people of color, And so they loved to have him work there because he knew how to talk to people and be fair but firm and that. And so he worked there, and he worked in Riverside, and he worked, of course, in E District, which we're in, the Hamlin Park is in. And then they had requested that he work the theater district, so he likes working in the theater district, you know, with the young, you have a lot of homelessness and so forth, and so that's it. But we got to know a lot of people in the neighborhood were just walking around, and we had a dog for 16 years. We had her from the time she was 6 weeks until she was 16. And so, and she was very friendly. She was part chow and part spaniel.
Oh, wow.
And so everybody knew Kiana. She, the security at Canisius knew her.
Oh.
And so she would go over and sit with them. And so it was, that she was just a good dog, but getting to go around the community, and people would stop, and the students loved her and whatever. But it's been a good time for the most part in Hamlin Park, and I don't think that our experiences would have been enriched if I had lived in another community because of the diversity. And I feel that with my nurturing, my house used to be the meeting place for my sons and young people in the community. So they would come in, and we would be in our kitchen and things like that, and they would share experiences that they had. And then in the yard, I would have young people, and so we used to have, in addition to block parties, we used to have events where all of the community would be involved, and we would rent a bus or two and take students or children to Chestnut Ridge or out to Ellicott Park or different places, and or we would block the street off, Pansy, and then we would block off Viola and Daisy, and everybody would come, and we would use that little circle there for the, you know, for food and games and different things. And we see some of the young people who are grown now, and they would say, "Oh, remember when we did this and that?" And so it helps us with things.
How have you experienced the sense of community in Hamlin Park grow or change over your years here?
I think the sense of community has changed because it's each person who comes with a different value system. And now, for example, I've been praying over it, and I don't know how we're going to handle it. But for example, the culture in here has been middle class standards. So everyone tried to maintain their properties, and they tried to be neighborly. And now you have a new group of people who are moving in and who are not homeowners. And so the landlords, in many cases, they do enough to get by. And so when you do that, you get a different clientele. And so it's a whole education process that has to take place. And so I was thinking yesterday, for example, on Sunday, I went for a walk on Florida, and this young man couldn't have been any more than 14 or 15 years old. Well, he was cursing like a sailor, and just whatever. So you know me in my motherly tone. I said, oh my God. I said, I can't believe you're saying these things. And what happened? What's going on with you? Why do you feel a need to use that kind of language? So he looked at me. I'm sorry, miss. And the next word was one of those swear words. So it's ingrained in him to say it's not a put on or whatever. So how do you assist a young person like that and help the parent? You know, help the parent. So that's something that's on the table for discussion. So we come across those kinds of things. It's like cross-cultural, and it can happen, you know, within ethnic groups. People think that it's a clash, you know, can happen that way. So that is something that I see that people of my age level withdraw and the community, you know, that kind of eroding. So it's something that we have to try to fix, and it's going to take outreach for people who have the time and the desire to do that, and it's across all demographics, I think, that way, you know. But what has happened, though, I noticed that on Viola, we had gone around and talked to people, and they're putting flowers out, and we have an African family, and for food, they grow corn.
Oh, wow.
And instead they took up their grass in the front lawn. So of course some of my neighbors were appalled. I said, but that's their culture. They're not destroying anything. They are growing something, and it's something to help them economically. You know, they're with food. And so that's abated. Nobody's bothering them. And the young man across the street had gone to, I think he was at Burgard and at Bosse's, and he took up automotive trades. So he has been fixing a couple of cars, and he has a certificate, so he can do an inspection, and he doesn't have the money to buy a garage or whatever, so he does it in his garage and with his driveway. So people have been upset in the Hamlet Park. I said, no. I said, because he does other things to offset that. Like he doesn't have to do the snow to prepare a path for the kids to walk. And I said he could be, a carouser and with the community with drinking and wild parties and all of that. And he isn't at the corner selling drugs or anything. So I consider him an excellent neighbor. So, that type thing. I said, well, you should make him do something with that garage and that shed. He should have siding on it and so forth. Well, when he gets the money, he's building to try to have money to put the clapboard on that is required, but he doesn't have the money to buy it. So, and there's no program that he can get into, that for a low cost loan, or low interest loan or whatever. So I said, leave him alone. He cuts his grass and that. So, it's those kinds of things that you see that are cross-generational. And so those are the kinds of things. And you have to stay on top of the merchants now, that they, at the corner, to make sure that their food is nutritious and fresh. And and the store is clean. And that their prices are not exorbitant. I can understand that you may be 6 to 10 cents higher than the local market, but you can't be charging people 25 and 50 cents more. You know what I mean? And so those are the kinds of things with a sense of community.
Yeah.
Before we had, and you didn't have to enforce those things, but now you know, you have people who don't have those same values, or it's all about the materialistic and money. You know, I have to make money, and so there were 3 houses on Delavan near the store that we have to keep on track and keep after. That you cut your lawn and you clean. You know, you don't have all the debris and so forth. So that's, you know, those are the kinds of things that we've seen that you really, if you're going to stay in the neighborhood, then you have to do that kind of outreach, you know.
So from this conversation, I can tell that people come to talk to you about their concerns about Hamlin Park, and they know that they trust you and respect you. And with that, I'm curious, what was, I suppose, like the ultimate reason for you to get involved in the community back in the late 60s?
We had children, and I wanted them to be in a community that was safe and pleasant, you know, that I didn't have to look over my shoulder and they would be out. So you those kinds of things. And there were older people who I respected, and I respected their cause of what they were fighting for, because they had invested a lot of money in their homes, and they wanted it kept, that they could have it as a legacy to their children, you know. And just preserving a neighborhood that had become predominantly black, you know, or African American. And so that was my reason for getting involved, and having people understand that we had a common goal, and working toward that. And so I appreciate the memory of Mr. Perkins and Mrs. Strasner for the work that they were doing, and Mr. Clark Eaton, he was a contractor. And and then I let them talk me into running for school board. And I was on the school board for 22 years. And I worked real hard for Lydia T. Wright School here on Oppenheimer. They have an enclosed garden, atrium there. And then we have one at 74. And then the renovations at School 53 and 17. So we've done, and in our buildings, we're the oldest outside of New York City, some of our buildings. And so we fought and lobbied and advocated that we would have funds for the schools. And I knew if we did that, then our representatives would have to recognize, and we bring them into the schools to see the conditions. And so when I left the school board, all of our schools had been renovated. Tracy Cardwell has pictures that you might want to see of those schools before they were renovated, but they rival any of the suburban schools now, you know, in terms of physical plan. And then I started having a visible presence in the schools, not telling teachers what to do, but if I observed behaviors that were not conducive to learning, I would ask if I could talk to the student. And sometimes you could meet a student who wouldn't calm down or who would not listen, especially those in the 7th and 8th grade or through 12th grade. You know, they're the most important people, and they know everything. You know what I mean? But the philosophy has always been, if you can just reach one and touch their lives, that has been my philosophy in working with young people, and when I was on the board. and then the community, you know, and that. I used to, for example, if I went to a conference, I'd always take a lunchtime and go to a museum and get a print. And then I'd come back and my husband would have it framed for me and I would put it in the schools. And just to make it lively, something beautiful, you know, that way. But it has been, in July 24th, I will be 80.
Wow.
And I will be 80 years. And, you know, when I think of that I've spent most of my life in Hamlin Park, and really, really a great time. George, you want to come meet these nice young ladies?
Yes, I'll be there in just one second.
Okay.
Sorry.
Hi.
This is my,
Florence Johnson, nice to meet you.
I see you already.
Tiffany Gibson.
Oopsie.
Oh, you're fine. I think this is yours. We're a little tangled, but it's fine. No, got it?
More working at it, I'm sorry about that.
okay. So that, you know, I just enjoy being with young people and being in the community.
Absolutely.
And that has been my goal of trying to give back and do. Now I was not born in Buffalo. I was born in Mississippi, and so my parent moved to Ohio when I was 9, and so I came from Ohio here, and I went to high school, finished up high school because my mother died when I was young, and I finished up high school at East High School, and so I saw what it is to be a child in a separated home, and try to do some things to help students or young people in the family when I saw that, you know, I saw situations like that. And I think that it behooves families now, there's so much stuff out there in the community that young people can get into. So we have to really boost and help them, make them feel good about themselves, you know? We have to do that. And it's not, even if it's perfect attendance, we don't know what some students have to do to get to the school door, and they do it on their own. And for college level, you know, you may in your freshman year get some D's, and they're not A's and B's, but you keep striving, you know, those kinds of things. So I just think that it's good. And the shops, we have. I see a revival. You mentioned about what changes. Have you gone to this?
The cafe?
The cafe, but have empty teacup.
Yes.
But and then the Mazai shop at Delavan, you have to go.
I've seen
Delavan and Meach,
Oh, Meach, yes.
and then behind that is a beauty parlor now
Oh.
on Meach.
Okay.
And then a young man, I was walking at Headley and Meach, that house that was so worn down and everything there. And apparently he purchased it. And little by little, he's been fixing it up.
Wow.
And so I passed one day, it's been recent, and he had put mulch out. And I said, she has wonderful flowers at the corner. Go take a look. and maybe you can strike a bargain. So when I was passing last week a day, and I see where he has flowers in and that, and so it's things, and then there's at the corner of Hughes and Meach is a young family, and they have a daughter, and they've been there a year, so the baby was born since she's 13 months. And I walk through and then talk, have a conversation with them, and they do outreach to the college students around.
Do they?
Mm-hmm.
In what capacities?
And with them, you know, just speaking and being friendly,
Yeah.
that they, you know, and not being afraid
Yeah.
of the students, that they will not reciprocate in that kind of respectfulness.
Mhm.
And so I saw a for sale sign that was on the lawn next door, and my heart just started pounding, and I went to it. I said, "Are you moving? Are you selling a house?" He says, "Oh, no, it's the house next door is being sold." And so that I felt better that way, you know, because you want to keep families in. And I've been doing some outreach with my Puma on Florida.
Mhm.
Have you been on Florida? There's a foundry that it used to be a plant that made mattresses, and they went out of business. So Mike and his friend purchased the place, and now it's 1 and 2 bedroom lofts. And then they have some other sheds there that they're going to have like a farmer's market. And then if you have a skill and a craft or something that you do, and you want to take your things there, your artifacts or whatever, there for sale. And so they're going to have that. And then they have once a month, like an activity for all the blocks could come in, and they have like hot dogs and hamburgers and things like that. So that, you know, that's like you were saying, changes in the community. That's something that I see young people taking on, and families. They had trees planted along Florida there, and they're living, but before it was all absentee landlords, and they're living in these homes. So that makes you feel good,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely.
And that. Those are the kinds of things that that make me happy and make me proud, you know, to see young people. They don't have to have the same values, and their tastes are going to be different, but just that they're taking on ownership and responsibility, and they see the value in the community to carry on. And and it's very diverse there. There are white families, young white families there,
Yeah.
and that. So you will appreciate that when you see the investment that they're making.
Right.
And they're doing it piece by piece with their own money, because there aren't any grants, and there isn't any with preservation with some of the homes. But just think that, and the only thing here, we had begun renovations on the house from the time we bought it and moved in. So the windows that are in, they let us keep. They let us keep those windows. But if we had not had those windows, we would have had the small casement windows. And so we moved in here in 72, and so the overlay didn't go into effect until I think 76. And then preservation came, as I told you, in the 90s and that. So now Karen will be able to tell you those dates. My memory, I had my sons die. I said, they told me with chemo I would have some memory lapses. I said, but boy, I thought it would be back by now.
Absolutely.
So dates are things
Right.
that you go, was that date? I don't know.
Yeah.
And, but our house, the bedroom was the first, and it was in the 1890s that was built. And then the rest of the house, the bedroom and the kitchen, and the rest of the house came in 1930. So they spent all of that, there was two children, husband and wife, they stayed in that small space,
Wow. Wow.
you know. And so then they added the rest of the house. And we have, of course, inside made modifications. And my sons, when they began making the modifications, like I showed the renovations, there was they had to put in a steel beam and another wooden one. And so the house was not, we were wondering why the back of the house seemed like it was sinking. And that was the reason. They didn't have the proper beams in. And so we say, it was the mercy of God we didn't sink into it. Because the back of the house didn't have a basement. It had a crawl space. But the rest of the house had, what they added on, had a basement in that. And so that was a really something. And by today's standards, it's much, more costly to do those kinds of renovations. But we really want young people to see what can be done with an older home. And so they have made this, I call it my penthouse for senior years. So my husband and I, this part of the house, they didn't really do that much too, but the opening, from the kitchen to here was not there. So they made that opening so that you can go from in here and see through to the kitchen.
Right.
So and of course the bath, I couldn't get into the old tub, and you've seen those with the claw feet, and you can't, I couldn't, and I'm still weak on this side. So they put in this bathroom. So let me just show you my new bathroom. I call it my spa.
Ooh. All right,
Did I-
let's
did I take it
unattach
out?
yourself. No,
That's
you're
okay.
fine. It's just because.
Okay. They put that door on,
Beautiful flooring as well.
and then they did the flooring, and then they did this.
Oh my goodness.
Go in.
Oh
It's-
wow.
it's
This is
fun.
gorgeous.
This is amazing. And I love the
Oh
color.
my gosh, it's so funny. It's so cool.
This is amazing. I love that flooring. Wow.
Amazing.
And you got Obama, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, is this the most recent portrait?
Uh-huh.
Wow, it's really
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah, they did. I don't know what your politics are, but it's a sad day for this country.
it is. Really true.
Yes. And I just pray that someone speaks up for EPA.
Oh my
Because, the rivers were getting better, and this one is something that I really, this is the ironing board,
Oh wow.
and it just comes down. You take this,
And you got an ironing
and
board.
you have the ironing board
Wow.
for what we iron today, we iron the sleeves in the front, right?
Yeah.
We have a suit on, and that, so I said, boy, I don't know, these kids are too much for me, and that, but, since I wanted to stay in the house, and they said they were going to this is from Tim Russett.
Okay.
You remember the person who was the narrator for Face the Nation?
Oh, wow.
I was president of the board then, and I went, I invited him to City Honors we were there for an honors program. And so he knew that my husband watched his program, and he has here, thanks for watching Meet the Press.
That's sweet.
Mhm.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, and so this is my laundry.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
So I don't, yeah, this is my laundry, and these are things they put in
Little cubbies.
for my supplies and stuff.
Perfect. That's
Wow.
amazing.
Truly
And then I
awesome.
can fold up there.
It's all in just one place.
Yeah.
And they did that, and
What a nice little oasis in here.
and then I have my computer is here.
Yes. Your little home office.
My little home office, and see, they took this opening out. There was a wall, and they took the wall out.
This is much spacier and open.
And this is the kitchen.
And the marble.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's the one film that he was showing you that I had is when the walls, they went all the way down to the walls. And there was a chimney in between the walls that they had to take down. It was just loose, and they didn't have codes back in those days.
Right.
So that was it. And this is my bedroom that they did over in the back here.
Oh.
Right here. You know, in the older homes, they had the bedrooms off from the kitchen.
So you have to go through.
Yeah, just a minute. So this is my bedroom,
Beautiful.
and I can just sit and read and whatever when I want to, and that.
Wow. This is amazing.
Oh, is this Isaac? Okay.
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, this is what I'm experiencing from the chemo. I said, how did I? And I would go down there all the time.
Yeah.
Edinburgh. He graduated from Edinburgh.
Amazing.
And that was my husband with his friend. He was always buying cars,
Really?
antiques. And he must have about 7 of them now.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I wanted you to see, so if you decide to stay in Buffalo, you might buy an old house and renovate.
Right. Absolutely.
But my son said to me, these were symbolic of when I lived in Mississippi with my granddad and everything. And she had those in that store up there.
Oh.
She has unusual stuff.
I've always wanted to go in.
You have to go in and see.
Okay,
And she
definitely.
has plants and everything out. And I got some plants from her to grow. And these are really something. They take ice cubes. So once a
Yes,
week.
my mom loves those. She just plops it in.
Yes, isn't that something?
So you got on the Hall of Fame, the Women's Hall of Fame. When was this? 2008. Wow.
Yeah.
And was this due to all your work within this community and the school board?
And then national work too. National advocacy for funding for schools
Amazing.
and children and all of the things that way I had. So I used to do a lot of baking too, and bake cookies and all of that. So I'm gonna get back to doing some of that. So this is how they've made the downstairs for me. That's
Amazing.
accessible.
This is beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very gorgeous.
And those are all prints and things. This is a school that we support. My friend this is in Kenya. My friend was in the Corps, in the Peace Corps,
Yes.
and she and her husband, she lives in East Aurora. I told her she has money, I don't. And so they had gone and during that time, and so we help her, we support, with other people donating and
Mhm.
that. But aren't they precious?
Yeah.
The children.
It's called Crossroads Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And
Very
then,
symbolic.
yeah, and then those are prints, like everywhere we went, my husband would get a print or something,
Mm-hmm.
and he would have it framed. I might be in meetings and he would be with something like that.
They're gorgeous. Do you have any favorite artists?
Right now, not really. I just go and I see, did you see the women activists in art at the Albright Knox?
I did.
I went to some of that, and, so you have different
Mhm.
tastes, you
Right,
go and
right.
you'll see. Now, there was a young man by the name of Emerson who I met in Savannah, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and he was very good, but what he would do is capture something from philosophy or from a philosopher,
Mm-hmm.
and he would put the saying underneath the prints.
Oh, wow.
That was really nice. I really enjoyed that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So when they're putting back things in the house yet, so when I get through that, would you like some water or something to drink?
I would love some water.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I actually would as well. Yes, your home is beautiful, and I can appreciate how you kept some of the old nuances intact in the
Yeah.
home.
Was that important to you, maintaining the history?
Yes. This is good. So let me get the glass for you.
Thank you so much.
Let's see, what else? Oh, listen, I have something I know the two of you will love.
Is that?
You will love.
I'm excited.
Have you heard of this?
No.
You
What is it?
being young, it doesn't have sugar.
Really? Is it like chocolate or it's like a dessert? Wow.
It's wonderful.
This is amazing.
It doesn't have sugar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow.
Wow, this is so kind of you. Thank you.
How did you discover this?
My sons are, they go and they get different stuff, different things to eat, and it's a keto diet, and it has meatloaf and something else in it.
It has
Isn't
what?
that good?
This is
Isn't
really
it
good.
Mm-hmm.
Tastes like the real thing.
Now, did you have any other questions or anything you wanted me to write or whatever?
I think we've gotten so much
Honestly.
information, but if there's anything else you'd like to share, we are
Thank you so
absolutely
much.
willing to listen. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
You're welcome.
It's been very enlightening hearing you speak.
It's been a pleasure.
Actually, I did have a question.
Mhm.
Like as you've
Sit.
experienced,
Sit down.
thank you. As you've experienced so much, like what are your hopes for the future of like Hammond Park, and what would you like to see, especially with Canisius?
I would like it, Canisius being really like we have centers or drawing. I'd like to see it almost like being a clearinghouse for, and they have a program for entrepreneurship and nurturing that, nurturing that with young people, and that they would create jobs for others in the community. But they have the know-how in writing the grants and all of that. I'd like to see that being a hub.
Right.
And now one of the things that I think you have an aging population, and Canisius and UB have the ability to do that, gather that kind of data,
Right.
and share it and integrate it. And what can we together do, and use the other colleges as support,
Mm.
you know, to do some of that, help to disseminate the information, and
Yes.
you know, and make it, not just at maintenance level, but taking it to another level. I went to a conference that UB sponsored. I told, who did I tell about that? I told your professors. I was saddened that there was no one there from Canisius. And you have a large grouping of scholars, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they were looking at the conditions of health factors for African Americans, and they are many. And and all it's with mental, you know, it's the the sociological things that take place and so forth. And so that would be my hope, that through the universities and the colleges, that they would have a greater impact and involvement of things happening in that, because we can't depend on the federal government, we really can't depend on the state and the local. So we're going to have to galvanize people, you know, and see how we can produce jobs for people, but giving them the know-how. Now, I was seeing something I was reading, and it says that they're jobs, but they're people who are not trained for it, or they don't have the skills for it yet. And if we could do some anticipatory things, what are now they know what jobs are going to be needed that are service. Now, how do we prepare people for that, and how do we retool people who have lost jobs for those? I was talking to a young lady who, when I lost my husband, they have a journey that's grief share, and the young lady was there. She had lost her mother, and she was there. She graduated from UB, and she had been working for about 5 years at this Independent Health. And when they had to cut back, they felt they only needed one technology person in that area. And that was her field. And so I said, wow, there's got to be, with her skill set, somebody who could take her, and she's very good with working with people, with adults, and have her help people become more computer literate. You know what I mean? That type thing. So a spinoff, if somebody was an entrepreneur and they had a small company and they wanted, or a business, and they wanted to do some things, a person like that could be retooled for whatever's needed. So that, I see that as, and then we look at geriatrics. What are the needs, and what in the future will happen to people like myself? You know, if I did not have 2 caring sons,
Right.
you know, who would help me with those kinds of things? And my sons, you know, in terms of resources, helping people not be afraid. At the Jewish Center, they have, in the Y, they have programs for seniors, and it's called Slippy, or Silver Sneakers. And you can sit on the chair, and they do exercises with you, and and things like that, but it's the camaraderie with people.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you have a chance to interact with people who may be in their 60s, and when I'm going to be 80. And so you hear their views on the world
Yeah.
and things like that. And then they have, some plays or something they tell you about, and you get involved, and they go on field trips. I haven't been on any of their field trips because I have so many medical appointments. But I do enjoy going to the exercise and that, and you feel better, and so it keeps you, medically more fit, and you don't have to go to, emergency rooms and things like that so often. So that's my hope for Hamlin Park, and that young people like yourself will want to live here, that we have more involvement, that Parkway is reestablished, and our young people are more supported,
Right.
and we don't. One of the things with violence that that's all a mental problem. It's a mental problem, and we in the community permitted that to happen when they shut down the mental institutions. Not everybody belongs there, but many do, and we just let them out on the streets to be to their own devices. Nobody makes sure they take their medication, check on their hygiene and just their medical status. And so, we create, and trying to save money, we create greater problems for communities.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things, if I were to, be able to look at and see what's going on, I would hope to see improvements in those areas, and with the people who are buying, out-of-state people buying houses, and they have realtors who oversee it for them, who don't care about the community, and they just rent the houses,
Right.
and people, unfortunately, when we have a lot of migrant people who have difficulty with the language, and they think that they may be moving into a place, and then when they get in, you're stuck.
Yeah. So,
Most times they have to sign a lease at least for a year.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So as youth, I suppose, and as a college student, you spoke about getting more involvement. In what ways could we, or Kenesha students or UB students, do that?
I think it starts with education, and I think for the most vulnerable are the like my little 5-year-old next door, reading to them, and that's just finding out, and when I talk about statistics and demographics, how many kids do we have in that age level in the community? And
Do we know?
no, we don't.
Oh,
And then
gotta
what
find
are
out.
what are their circumstances for home living? Is it a single mom working? And what's the educational level maybe of the mom? And because I think you've heard the saying, if people knew better, they sometimes will do better.
Yeah.
And how do you read a story to a child? Some of the things like that, and the outreach. I had read once about a small town in Europe, and whether the mom was married or in a family,
when they found out a woman was pregnant, they made sure it was mandatory that they go for the prenatal. And during that time, they were educating the mom, expectant mom, of what kinds of responsibilities you have toward this child and what the nourishment should be. And also with the vaccinations that this child is going to need. And we want to make sure that you are there to make sure that child have those. And they, with it, you know, with a small town, they did outreach, but we have so much to offer to families that way, you know, to do that kind of outreach. And teens, how do we help young girls develop behaviors that are safe for them?
Yeah.
You know, many times they do things that they don't know that are injurious to them. They don't know. They think they're doing things to be popular, and they think they're, you know, but that could backlash on you, and you don't know when that's going to come up again, and someone will say, well, I knew her when, or somebody, guy the same way, you know. So I think it's some of those things. How do you present yourself, you know? I think it's, you know, for college, when you're college students, this is the expectation. And our kids, many of them go on college campuses, they don't know. You know, you've seen it. They're just there. And so unfortunately, the safety net for them is slight, and they have to go home because they have not been able to demonstrate that they can meet that level.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
Absolutely.
So it's things like that, and I think safe clubs. If you're an education major, these are some things that you might want to do, and you know, activities that you can engage in. You might know they have a daycare center. You know. All of that information, I don't think is there, and you aren't going to reach everyone. You know, it's just small groups that you can reach out to, I think, and that would be very helpful. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I in the with the family next door, there's one, we got her, and she chose the violin to play, and so she's going to continue with the instrument, and I went for her spring concert. You know, I pressed my way. I wasn't feeling well, but I went. So she came, she says to me, Mrs. Johnson, are you coming to my concert? And so I, after I, you know, said, you know, the instrument is wonderful, and you're doing it, so I could not go.
That's amazing.
So.
Was it a great concert?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, you could hear some of the instruments this way and that way, but you know,
they're getting there.
Yeah, they're getting there. That was funny. And I went for Emery's graduation.
So sweet.
What is he going into?
He's going. Oh no, he's the baby that
Right.
was in
What
preschool.
is
So
he?
he's going to kindergarten.
Okay,
So
kindergarten.
So
Okay.
he told me, that's big boy school, big boy
It
school.
is.
You know,
So sweet.
and that. So we've been counting and ABCs, and he can write his name
Okay.
and that, and then I read stories to him, and we're trying to get him with vocabulary, so with sight vocabulary. So he knows, he can say, he knows the letters to stop, and he knows the word stop. And then some of the signs, the traffic signs, they'll say walk, you know, and he sees that. And wherever I take him, I expose him to words and that. But what was truly funny, one day I said to him, he had gone maybe to the zoo, and I said, oh, Emery, we have to talk about that. He says, yes, we have to talk. And I said, yes, we have to have a conversation. So he said, and I said, that means a talk. So he says, oh, conversation. So then he'd see me days after and so forth, and weeks, and I might be going to a doctor appointment, and he was on the porch and so forth. So he says, Miss Johnson, are we going to have conversation today?
That's great. That's amazing.
Yeah, so, it's things like that.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes with college students, just a personal relationship, they would go and sit with, you're doing your homework and they're doing their homework, and showing them you have to work along the way. It's
Right.
not just that you get to one level and you stop, it's always work.
Always work.
And so it's that kind of thing. And then to occupy their free time, what are some things that they can do that will help them in real life? And
You know what I wanted to do once is like there's so many people at Canisius who love rollerblading, and we thought it'd be fun if we could like figure out money to get like smaller size rollerblades and like be able to rollerblade with some of the kids in the neighborhood.
That would be neat.
Yeah.
That
Very
would
cool.
really, this is what I'm saying, some fun things, some educational stuff,
Yeah.
all of that. Because many of the families, the young families, don't have transportation to different places, so that's something.
How do you think we would go about getting like information of how many because you were saying we don't really know like the age demographic of the children and like how many? How do you think you'd go about doing that?
Okay, you might start with I'm just thinking who would have, the schools might have for the younger one.
Right.
And
right.
they may have, and we would hope that Erie County would have demographics.
Right.
Asking them if they have that kind of data to look at. And then for the city, breaking it down, and like you said, to Hamlin Park, where are those kids?
Yeah.
And so forth. And so that would really be helpful.
I
Yeah.
agree.
But as I said, with the grant writing and things of that nature, the college and the university, they could have a great impact. in that.
Absolutely.
Hopefully that changes in the coming years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but any of your peers that that are looking, tell them to kind of think about investing. And while you're out, go on Florida. And when you leave here, you'll make a right turn on Florida, going down that way.
Sure.
And then you will go to Jefferson, and you'll see it's like a little community.
Right.
They've planted trees.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
we will.
It's
That's
really,
great.
really nice. Warms your heart to see
It does.
that what people can do in that. So.
As we begin to finish up, I just have one last small question.
Uh-huh.
So you talked a lot about prayer and like God in your life a little bit. You mentioned Him.
Uh-huh.
Do you see that you have a strong faith community in Hamlin Park, or has that?
That I think that it's.
Especially with Canisius being a Jesuit college.
Yeah. Well, I
There's-
reminded that I don't. I need the students to demonstrate that to
Right.
the community. And I
Absolutely.
was saying to them when I was over, I said, with Canisius being a Jesuit college, I said to the students, you can't act any old way. You were the expectation from you, is that you will demonstrate that compassion and caring and respect, that supports the philosophy and the vision, for the college. So, but it's very diverse now.
Right.
Okay. I have down the street, there's an Arab family.
Mm.
And then in the circle, there's the African family. And they have their own religious tradition.
Mhm.
And then we have some from the Muslim community.
Mhm.
But we do have people who have a faith. And it's transmitting the values, not so much that they belong to a religious sect or a group or whatever,
Mhm.
but that they demonstrate some of the qualities.
Right.
You know, that's the important thing. Because I'm looking at people who say that they are from the religious right and that they uphold all of the values of Christ. Well, if you say that, then you should demonstrate that. And nobody, if you can vote for whoever you want to, but you've got to hold that person accountable.
Yes.
And when their policies are hurting people who are God's children,
Mhm.
how can you support that? And you say, our God is a loving God and he's a caring God. I don't understand that. And, you know, so those are the things that, you know, are universal,
Mhm.
you know, in every religion. Don't you
Right.
think? You know,
Yeah.
so
I
if
agree.
we can get that embedded into students when you aren't concerned about their religion, you're concerned about helping them demonstrate these kinds of qualities in their life. And it's going to help them grow in every aspect, because when they go into corporate structure or whatever, and not all of them, but in the ones that reflect American values or the core of what, you know, we would want them to, they're going to that'll help them get into an interview.
Yeah.
You know what I
really
mean?
will.
And help them be able to express themselves in that. That's important. Would you like more water?
I'm all right.
I'm good. I'll
Yeah.
finish
Okay.
this.
I appreciate
Thank you so
that
much, though.
Yes.
They bought me this seltzer thing over there.
Yes, the
So,
soda stream.
Got
That's
my.
awesome.
How does it work exactly?
Oh, you put your water in to this line, and then you put it underneath that machine. And I'm just the reason I wanted to. They're showing me how to use it. So you put it on, and press the top, and that's it.
And then it makes it like seltzery?
Mhm.
That's so
Mhm.
interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, they.
Technology.
That
is
I
always
tell
evolving.
you, that's it. And so I had to learn things all over again. I never had a dishwasher because my husband's philosophy was that we had 4 pairs of hands, so we didn't, we would plate for each person. Now you need a dishwasher. So
That's sweet.
yeah, so we would do like little trips to the park, not anything expensive because we didn't have any money. And so having a dishwasher now is a luxury. I said, now, why didn't we have this earlier in my life? Because, when you cook, you make such a mess with dishes and everything.
Absolutely.
Yes. And, but they were very frugal with going for things. There were imperfections with the dishwasher and dents in the refrigerator, and they got that with everything. No, that was marked down. They were looking for deliberately finding the dots and dents in it.
Yes.
And so they could get it at reduced price,
Yeah.
So that's what they did. And
Very
if
nice.
somebody had ordered something and they didn't get it, and the merchant was trying to get rid of it.
That's smart.
Oh.
That's very smart.
Amazing.
Wow. I'm going to take that when I get home. That's a
And
nice little
and then
tip.
we had done. My husband and I had bought draperies, and draperies had jumped in costs, and so when they did for their renovating, they just got the shades, and you just pull them because otherwise you want the light to come in, and so they just got the shades, and they're much cheaper. Oh, much
Really?
cheaper.
Okay.
And they got them on Amazon.
Oh man, that's so sweet.
Amazon is amazing though.
Yeah.
You can I think you can order groceries now.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and everything
Everything.
is so much cheaper.
It is. Yes.
So much cheaper.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
that. So, if you think when you get, ask Carolyn about the dates, because
Mhm.
I'm not sure about that.
Absolutely.
But if you think of anything else that you would want to ask me, just call.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you for your time.
and
Yes.
stop by someday to see the old
Mhm.
lady.
Will
Oh
do.
my goodness, I'm
Yes.
so glad you extended that offer because I
Yeah,
was hoping
stop
that.
by. Stop by to see me.
Okay.
I will.
I'm here. You know, I go to Silver Sneakers
Mhm.
in the morning at 10:30,
Okay.
and so I go 10:30 to 11:30, and then she takes us over to the center in their athletic room,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and she'll have us do like light weights for you, because she gives strength for your upper body,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then also to keep you from osteoporosis.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
And so these are things that I'm saying that they'll
Mhm.
learn from. If anybody will learn from there, and then for your legs, she'll put you on the leg press, and have you do like maybe 10 reps,
Mhm.
and then so
Yeah.
that
You get
and
in
the
a flow.
bicycle,
Mhm.
and that's the end of your time there. But
Mhm.
I go 3 times a week.
Okay.
And then there's a yoga class
Fun.
for beginners and for seniors.
Okay.
And so you sit on the chair and you do the poses and you
Mhm.
do the stretches and that. And that's fun. I find that being fun and that. So it's been sadness without my husband, because we were married 52 years, and so the guys, they come around to see me, or they call me every day, and so I enjoy company.
Absolutely. And I live I'm staying in Kenesha, so
Oh yeah, so you
Yeah.
can come over to see me.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I look
so
forward to
that's
it.
great. It really is great. And I've been doing something with small recipes,
Mhm.
It's hard to cut back when you've cooked,
Oh,
Mm.
yeah,
all
yeah.
of that. And so, and my husband loved leftovers, so
Mm.
I haven't, with pasta and that, he loved lasagna
Oh.
and stuff like that.
Wow.
So I haven't done much. My friend, the person who helped the guys with caring forth with my oldest son,
Mhm.
is a designer, and he does computer graphic design.
Wow.
And so he designed the house, all of the things that you see, and went around for the materials and looking who had the best buy and
Mhm.
things like that. So
Cool.
that's how that got done.
You did a very good job.
So,
Mhm.
your name is Florence
Mhm.
Johnson, which is
Mhm.
beautiful.
Thank you.
How does anyone ever call you FloJo?
Oh, yes, they
I
do.
love that.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
husband all the time, and my other relatives. So he he had a sibling, a sister. She died earlier, and he was the survivor of all of his cousins. He was 81 when he passed. And his cousins all passed away in their beginning 70s or mid 70s, So, and they had problems with cardiovascular,
Oh.
and they, just the guys are all focused on eating healthy,
Mhm.
so that's good,
Yeah.
and that's so forth. And I saw coming, Canisius had a little market there, marketplace.
The mobile market?
Yes.
Yeah, they had that from Massachusetts Avenue.
Mhm.
MAP. They had the
Mhm.
community garden. They just came here. We're actually working. The professor that I work with of sociology kind of helped organize that.
Mhm.
Okay, so how often is that going to be in the neighborhood?
The next one, I believe, I have a thing out in the car. I can grab it for you.
Okay,
Let me
because
grab
I would like that, you know.
Oh,
if
some
it's
fresh
close.
air.
Yes, it's right in my door.
Let me-
Give me a
Very
chance to walk,
convenient.
right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right down the street.
Yeah. So that's just keeping things together that people will do. And I love that furniture store. She has some of everything.
The Masai.
hmm
It's a furniture store.
She has furniture
Ooh.
in. She has some of everything in.
Okay.
And it's not junky.
I will
Mhm.
check it out.
And
I have
that,
to.
so I hope people will patronize her
Mhm.
and we can keep her, you know, in the community.
Does she live in Hamlin Park?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But the fact that she didn't go on Elmwood
Right. Right.
and
Just right.
but decided to come here, that was good.
Yeah.
That was good.
It brings some revenue, some new faces. That's very nice.
Yeah. And those pieces, that piece behind you, the sideboard, the table, and the chairs, those are all of my married stuff.
Oh wow. Wow.
All my married stuff.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you kept it,
Yes.
even with the new renovations.
mhm.
It's great to see.
The couches are old. Those are new right here. Now that's neat. So, when is the next one?
Oh, it's not for another month.
Oh, at the end of the month?
Yeah.
Oh, that's gonna be neat. And after my birthday, the day after my birthday.
Yeah. And I believe that they do have, they have it more often in just like other places. So like if you go to their website or just type in Mobile Market, Massachusetts Avenue, you'll
Oh,
probably be able to find
yes.
it.
I had the most delicious salad that had the arugula lettuce.
Mobile Market.
And they had the little tiny tomatoes,
Ooh, the cute ones.
and they had all of the fruits. They had strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries.
Ooh.
And then they had a mango dressing, like a vinaigrette.
That sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Wait, where did you get the salad from?
It was so good. And they had roasted chicken. You know how you have roasted chicken, and you have like the indentations and so forth of that when you roast it.
Right.
Oh, it was so good. The chicken
Where is this
breast.
from?
Oh no, when I had to go for my checkup, I was over at Roswell.
Okay.
Their cafeteria is fantastic.
Gotta check it out.
So I was young, and so I hadn't eaten, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm so famished." So I went up and I looked around, and he had was putting it together, and then to finish, he put some shavings of cheese over it, just a little bit. It was so delicious, and
Sounds delicious.
I love salads. I could have. You know, you don't have to give me a whole lot of food. I just wanted something like that, you know. And that. And turkey burgers. Do you like turkey burgers?
Yes.
I do those, and I put chopped spinach in, and I do celery.
Love
And
celery.
now they have Vidalia onions, and they're sweet.
Yes,
Oh.
they're so delicious.
they're so
My
good.
mom made some the other day. She grilled them up with mushrooms and broccoli.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm thinking
That's
about
good.
recipes now because I usually have to cook for myself. So I'm brainstorming, trying to figure out what I'm gonna start cooking.
Those
Turkey burgers.
really turkey
Okay.
burgers, and you get a pound, and you put all of that in, and it stretches,
For a while.
and you don't put a filler in, the filler of the vegetables, so those are good for you.
Okay.
And I do them sometimes I like to do them in a Teflon pan on the top of the stove, because you get that browning on both sides, and you press them down, and sometimes I do them in the oven. But I like the fry pan better than the oven, because then you don't get that crispiness on the
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
And then if you want to put cheese in, you can.
Okay.
Oh,
Ooh.
The
yeah.
options are endless.
Yes, make it a true burger.
Yeah, I'll make it a burger that way. And they have these multi-grain, they have the bread that's really thin, and sometimes if you want to make a burger with that, you can. Or they have the buns too. They have thinner buns.
Oh,
Because
cool.
the one, multi-grain.
Absolutely, gotta do it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So you will enjoy that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any plans for your birthday?
I really don't. I was thinking I might want to go down to Chautauqua
Okay.
for
Very
a
nice.
day, and see what lecture they have
Mhm.
with a day, and I
Mhm.
like that. And I'll have to see with this committee if they're going to do anything else with the lecture with the health, solutions
Mhm.
to the problems they have identified. And they brought in a person from Duke University.
Oh, I'm from North Carolina. so-
Mhm. Yeah, and they had someone from what's the other one? One of the medical centers. It was John Hopkins.
Okay.
And so they do outreach too, and they were trying to show the community or enlighten the community as to what could be done.
Mm.
So they had about 7 groups to identify with and give input, and they were going to come back and with an assessment for the community. I'll get the address of the people who were the leaders for bringing that here.
Mhm.
And so really, really good, really good. So that's what I might do. And then I don't know what else. But the guys and I might go to dinner
Very nice.
and
Yes.
that.
Food is
then-
always good.
So that would be it. Or my little friend next door,
Mhm.
he and I might go. He loves cupcakes.
Ooh.
Oh, very
He
cute.
loves cupcakes. So he and I might go to one of the bakeries
Mhm.
and have a cupcake.
Oh, yeah.
A
You can
birthday
go to
cupcake. Yeah.
you can go to
Mhm.
the zoo and then head across to Fairy
Yes.
Cakes.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Hey, Bob.
I'm gonna go hide your
How you doing?